everyone, welcome to my nature diaries. Today I'm going to share with you 7 tips and some watercolor techniques that I have used in this particular layout to create some really what I think are dynamic and beautiful textures in my nature journal. So let's get started with the video. My first tip is to make sure that you choose the right paper. My biggest tip for this is to choose papers that have cotton in them. If you can't get 100% cotton, like this particular journal, then maybe pick something that has a portion of some kind of cotton material in it. It's also important to make sure that it is a heavyweight paper. This Strathmore journal, I'm not even sure what the composition of the paper is, but it seems to hold up to heavy washes and all the techniques that I seem to throw at it. If you're not sure about your sketchbook, tip number 2 is use the back page of the journal to practice your watercolor technique. I'm testing it with heavy washes, with a spritzer bottle. I'm also making sure that I can lift the paint off as well with a tissue paper, as well as adding splatters and anything else that I can think of. After really experimenting with that page, I'm using it as a key for this journal. My next tip is about choosing the colors you're going to use for your backgrounds. Sticking to a limited palette and also just using colors that you really see that are in the flowers or plants, whatever it is that you are using can make your journaling easier. I also like to make sure I'm adding the same elements of color on both sides of my spread just for a more cohesive look. When choosing a single subject to journal, what I like to do is take inspiration from the actual item itself, and in this case I was nature journaling some milkweed pods. I believe the colors that we use in our nature journal can really tell a story as well. I often mix colors together right on the actual page, so with this I have alizarin crimson, and then eventually I layer over some yellow ochre, some sap green, as well as a little ultramarine blue to kind of create that purple. This ensures a background texture that is lively and rich and feels like it has depth to it as well. Number 4 is using masking fluid techniques to help create texture. Using some masking fluid along with a soapy brush, I'm going to experiment just a little bit with a couple different techniques with this masking fluid. First, I'm going to use masking fluid over white paper. You'll want to use this technique especially if you are trying to maintain those really bright whites or even just light areas that you can paint later. I'm using it here to protect the water in this little waterfall and also to protect those little yellow flowers that are hidden amongst all those green leaves. Using masking fluid this way isn't necessarily creating texture, but it's allowing you to have the freedom to basically create texture. Using this masking fluid is just a way or a tool that you can use to help you paint a little bit faster and maybe even a little bit bolder, and that's what happened to me. I did feel much more confident when painting the rest of this scene. Knowing that those whitest areas were preserved, I was able to just step forth and go a little bit darker, add layers, and really work on just developing the whole painting scene. I do believe that for me, masking fluid is a way to help kind of create the space for creating textures in my nature journal. Generally, masking fluid isn't easy to use outdoors like this. I wouldn't be able to do that, but they do sell masking pens that you could use, and that could be a lot of fun when you're outdoors painting on the go. Let me know in the comments if masking fluid is something that you use regularly or would like to use a little bit more often in your painting with watercolors. The second technique I'm using with masking fluid is over watercolor. What I'm going to first do is paint wet into wet. I'm using clean water here, and then I'm going to add a light layer of greens to this background. These greens are going to be my brightest color or lightest color in this particular painting. Because these flowers that I'm going to be painting are in a woodland setting, there isn't really a lot of sunlight or direct light that's shining down on the leaves. So because of that, I don't need really bright, vivid whites in this particular painting. I'm going to cover most of this area with a few different shades of light greens, and then I'm going to let it dry before I put on the masking fluid. For this technique, painting with the masking fluid is actually going to help me create texture that I would normally paint in with the watercolors. With the masking fluid, I am working on creating some organic shapes that might resemble leaves or leaf clusters, foliage that you would find on the forest floor. Using the masking fluid like this creates a looser effect for this forest floor. It's a way of restraining me from wanting to paint fussy details with all the leaves and instead allow those flowers to be the star of the show of this painting. When wanting to create textures in your sketchbook, it's really important to have fun and a play at using these types of different tools. While you might not always know how they're going to turn out, very often they're pretty easy to fix and correct. I'm also adding the masking fluid to this meadow scene, and I'm going to be using it in the front for some taller grasses and foliage. I want to make sure to maintain some of those lighter values of greens in this meadow painting. I'm adding short lines here along the back as you go into the distance to represent some of the lighter values from the sun hitting the grasses. You'll just want to make sure that the masking fluid is completely dry, which doesn't take very long, and then we can get on to the very next step. And this is adding the color in. This is our second layer of, in this case, greens. What I'm doing is I'm just going in with a darker shade, as you can tell, and I'm varying up the tones just a little bit, but I'm painting all around this flower that I didn't mask off, but I'm also making sure to get around all of those masked areas so you'll be able to see some contrast. What's really fun about this technique is you can do this, add one layer of paint or the second layer of paint, and then let it dry, take that masking fluid off, and you can add a whole other layer of masking fluid and then go darker again. I'm also adding some different tones of greens, some warms and cools as well. Once I got to this part of the painting, I was really enjoying the textures that I was already creating with the watercolors as well as what I was going to be creating with the masking fluid on there. Even though I had an idea of what I wanted, this was all kind of an experiment for me, and I learned so much from it. I've said this before, but I really believe that a sketchbook or a journal should be a place that you can experiment, have fun, and try these different techniques to see where they take you and what you can learn from them as well. I was enjoying painting so much that I ended up painting too far into my blank space that you see over to the left, which was going to be used for my handwriting. However, once again, that's not an issue with watercolor, especially if you've chosen a watercolor paper that can lift or blend out the colors, which is what I did, and you can see that later on as I work on this. I removed the masking fluid on the left hand side, and now I'm just going to go ahead and fill it in. I'm going to just go ahead and fill in those white areas that I really didn't want to be white. There was a lot more white than what I needed, but that's no problem. I'm just going to go ahead and fill those in now and help to balance out this painting. For this meadow area, I decided to just take a damp brush and smooth out a lot of those masked areas so there wasn't such a sharp contrast between the two. I'm just finishing up now by adding a few more details just to add a little bit more realism to these few little scenes. All in all, I think that masking fluid can create some very interesting textures, and I'm looking forward to working with it more in the future. Tip number 5 is try adding splatters for texture. While we've seen this technique many times, one of the things that I learned was try using some different brushes to create some different effects. This toothbrush, because the bristles were so short and stiff and rigid, they created a much finer spray. Of course, you can also use a paintbrush for this as well, but I think the main thing is to have a lot of fun with it and try to see what you can create with it as well as just a decorative background. Remember too, you can also take a damp brush and soften any of those really dark splatters if you feel like they are getting in the way of your composition. You may want to consider adding multiple colors that you've used in your painting to add as splatters in your composition. They'll add so much character, richness, and depth. Number 6, stamps can add texture as well. If you are a subscriber, then you know that I love adding stamps to my nature journals. The stamps are not just decorative, although you could use them for that as well. Number 7, text can also add texture to your painting. No matter what kind of journaling that you may do, adding words and text is just a sure way to create a really interesting composition in your sketchbook. I believe that text is also another great way to keep somebody staying on your page. So if they're looking at your sketchbook, they're hopefully reading it and they're staying there much longer than just by looking at a picture. I do hope you were inspired to create some different textures in your journal or nature journal, and let me know if you do. I'd love to hear from you. And also remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share the video. That helps me out greatly. Remember that you are so amazing and creative. Till next time, bye.